Welcome, everybody, to the Corporate Warriors podcast. My name is Fela, and in this episode, I'm so lucky to have Shannon Talbot with me. Shannon is a ex-corporate executive. She's a certified coach, keynote speaker, and also a author of her latest book, Breaking Free. I have received the book like a few months ago. I love it. I love the design. Everything is amazing about it. The subtitle already gives you a very clear indication about what this is a book about. So it's about stop holding back, start being you, your guide to creating the career and life of your dreams. So this is really interesting book, Shannon. Thank you so much for sending it to me. The book is filled with personal anecdotes, which I love to read about. So to get to know you a little bit better. A lot of nice coaching tools, coaching questions as well. So basically it really guides us through the whole process that you went through in your life and career and with your other coaching experience. So it's a really nice book. It's kind of a mix of storytelling and self-help, I would say. So it's really giving an amazing overview. Thank you so much, Shannon, for the work. This is amazing, and I'm happy to talk about it in this session.
Thank you for those kind words, and I'm excited to be here and chatting with you today.
Amazing. So Shannon, would you mind starting? Just give a little bit more of an introduction about yourself. Anything that comes to your mind that you find would be relevant for our audience to give a little bit more of a perspective on who you really are and how you came here.
Sure, I'd love to. So I'm going to give away a little bit of the book, but don't worry, you can still go get it and dive into more of my stories. But in high school, I had two what I call secret silly dreams. So I had a dream of being an author, and I had a dream of being a speaker. So I'm one of those weird 5% of the population who is not afraid of public speaking. 95% are afraid of it. I love it. I'm weird. But I had those two dreams, but it was like, those aren't real careers. Like, you can't make money from writing or speaking or, I need to really just go and get a stable job and make good money and, get the husband, get the kid, have the kids, buy the house, all the things that society tells us to do. And so that's kind of the path I went out on. So I went to school for business, and then I got a job at a bank, and I worked my way up at the bank, and I did really exciting, awesome things. I worked in the international banking division of a big bank here in Canada. I got to fly all over Latin America and the Caribbean and do really cool stuff, and I loved it. But I didn't grow up thinking, ooh, I'm going to work for a bank one day. And so then a time hit where I was like, you know what? This just doesn't light me up anymore. And I don't see myself spending my next however many years, till when we retire in a bank. So I actually worked with a coach. I'd never worked with a coach before. And I went to a 3-day retreat and was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I left that retreat with a goal of being an entrepreneur to help people live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives, which was shocking to me because, again, I'd never really thought of that for myself. In the meantime, I switched careers. I went into advertising and worked in advertising for 2 years. It was fun. It was really creative people and all this, and it was really great. But the hours were insane. And I have 2 kids who were young at the time. They're 9 and 11 now, which is still young. And it just wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted with my kids at that point. I was looking for greater work-life balance. I was looking for less stress. I wanted to be a more patient and, less angry mom because my kids would tell me I was angry a lot. Wow. And so during COVID, so actually 3 years ago right now is when I launched my business. So I left the corporate world and I started coaching and speaking full-time. And it is a career. You can make money from it. And then wrote my book this year as well to help other people find their passion. And, whether that's staying in corporate, whether it's leaving corporate, whether, it doesn't matter what it is, but really like following their hearts and what they want to do and helping them overcome the fears that stand in their way of getting there.
And that's not a small task. That's not a small
No, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
But I love it. I love also. So we're they're standing up or working for the exact same objective, because it's really about this, not just the career side, but the career and the life integrations, like overall what makes us happy, right? How can we be fulfilled?
Yeah.
And I think for many, many years, for some weird reason, we were just completely splitting everything up, and we were doing as if what we do in our career has no impact on our life whatsoever, right? It's completely separate from each other. And
Yeah.
I'm just it's interesting because you are totally focusing on that. I had somebody else on the podcast as well that comes from career coaching and now is also, in addition to it, becoming a life coach. So I think it's more and more the, probably we just recognize as a society as a whole that we need to think more holistically about our lives and
Yeah.
about what we do. And fitting to that, I think what I your favorite my favorite chapter in the book, and I just want to say the name of it, right? I like read it out loud. So the very last chapter of your book, you already know, right? It's called "The Only Time It's Too Late Is When You're Dead." So I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That should be a reminder to everybody, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
It doesn't matter how old you are.
yeah,
You can go out, I've had 3 distinct careers and I'm 42, I think. Yeah, I turned 43 in June and I always mess up my age. It's funny. I'm like eternally 41. But yeah, and some people look at that and go, "Oh, that was really young." Other people are like, "Oh my gosh, 40 is so old." And we all have different perspectives. But it doesn't matter. Like you can be any age you like, young, old, and chase your dreams, and you can do it. And it's just a matter of facing those fears or whatever obstacles are in your way and going for it.
when was this, like, I don't know if you can pinpoint it that much. You said in your introduction that an important moment was also your children telling you that you're angry all the time. Obviously that's nothing easy to hear as a mother, I can only
Mhm.
imagine. But was there another, like, 1 or 2 pivotal moments where you're like just realizing for yourself this isn't working? Like,
Yeah.
what was that moment in time, so perhaps people can relate to that, and then we're like, oh, perhaps that's the same for me, you know?
Yeah. So for me, one pivotal moment was actually during a workshop when I worked at the bank. We had this incredible speaker come in for International Women's Day and lead a workshop with us. And and she asked us one question: what about your job lights you on fire? And I, at this time, like career was number one for me. Like I don't think I had kids yet. So it was my top priority. And I put so much effort into it. I was constantly strategizing on how to, keep growing and what I could learn and how I could move up and all of those things. And I sat there and I didn't have an answer. And it was like, oh, how did I get here? Like, it was the first time in my life where I'm like, I don't know what lights me up. I don't think anything. And
Wow.
that was not okay with me because I'm a big believer in, we work, I think the latest stat I read was 90,000 hours in our
Yes.
lifetime. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not okay with not enjoying my work, right? You're going to have seasons and it'll be up and down. But, in general, if you're not enjoying your work, that's a heck of a lot of a time to be spending doing something you're not enjoying. So for me, that answer wasn't okay. And that's what kind of started me on that journey to, okay, then what? Like, if this isn't lighting me up, what do I need to do? Or where do I need to go to find that? And I think that's the other hard part too, right? Especially as we go through different stages of our lives, we want different things, right? And sometimes career will be most important. Other times family might be more important, or you might be like looking after, an elderly parent, or, whatever that is. You might have young kids, and we'll go through different phases. And just to know that's okay. Our priorities and everything can change. It's a matter of like listening to our guts and our hearts and following where we really want to be.
Yeah, totally. I feel like what comes to my mind when I hear you talking, and I fully agree. I mean, 90,000 hours, I'm always just hoping that it wakes people up a little bit, and it doesn't even include commute or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's just crazy. But what I feel is like many people, they are more like an NPC, you know that from your voice, like a non-playing character. They like
Yeah.
float through it, and they don't even reflect, like, do I actually like this? Does it light me up? Is there something in my job that lights me up? And I'm also really passionate about that. So I think, yeah, we need more people to talk about this all the time, because it's like the
Yeah.
worst case scenario is exactly what you've written in your last chapter. It's like, I mean, if you're not in the title, let's say, we don't want to be old and, you know, basically unable to do a new project, and then realizing what I did was not what I wanted to do all of my
Yeah.
life, like main part of my life, at least in terms of hours. I mean, we don't spend as much time with our kids, basically. They're in
Yeah.
school, you're at work, or like all the parents out there that are working, right? I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy to
Yeah.
me.
Totally. And I'm going to sound morbid for a minute, but sometimes we have to be morbid. And it's like
Yeah.
when someone close to us passes away,
Mhm.
and hopefully many of you listeners have not had to experience that yet,
Mhm.
but that's another wake up call, right? To
Yeah.
know, especially when people pass away younger, you know, versus, you know, I have grandparents who live to be in their 100s, which is phenomenal. But to know, like, okay, we don't know how long we are here for. And what do you want to be known for?
Yeah.
Right? What do you want your kids to remember you for, or your friends, or your team, if you have a team at work, or your coworkers? Like, what do you want to be known for? And will you have regrets later on if you don't do the thing? And it may not be work related. Maybe there's a hobby you've always wanted to try, or a new skill you've wanted to learn, and you just keep putting it off. But is that going to make you regret it one day? And so just thinking of it from that aspect, like, what is it that you could be doing or taking one small step towards that will make you have less regrets, you know, when your time
Yeah.
does come after hopefully a very long and happy life.
Yes, totally. And oftentimes when we make this one great experience, there's gonna be a ripple effect, right? There's like one thing that lights us up again. It's like, oh, can I include that somewhere else as well? You know, like, is there a
Yeah.
way to
This is
create a
the
career
domino
around
effect.
that?
Once you start it, there's no going back. It's kind of awesome.
That is awesome. Yeah. What would you say when you now think back on your career? I mean, I know you did a lot of the work. I just want to make sure you know that the audience is, you know, up to speed as well, even if they have not yet read the book. Just so,
Yeah.
what would you say in your personal experience, the keeping going, the wanting to be successful? I think we can all relate to that. All of the audience, I'm pretty sure, that are listening to career podcasts in their free time, they can relate to that. So, what once you started to dig a little deeper, right? I mean, first there's like this moment where you realize actually that doesn't make me happy, there's no spark or whatnot. What did you find out on a deeper level? Like, the next obvious question would be like, why did you do it then at all, right?
Yeah. So, you know, we all have beliefs and I like to call them stories that
Mhm.
we have learned from a young age, from, you know, when we're babies, and then they continue to be, you know, to grow as we get older. And some of the stories might be true, but a lot of stories we have in our heads are false. They're fake news, in other words. And, you know, I did that a lot, and it was around my definition of success. So, how I define success for a very long time in my career was by how much money I made and my title, right? If I didn't reach a certain title by a certain age, I wasn't successful. I was behind. If I didn't earn a certain amount of money, you know, oh, I wasn't successful.
Mhm.
And, you know, these are values that sometimes our parents put on us, or society, or we just, you know, we do it to ourselves. A lot of my stories I did to myself. No one was telling me that. It was me with very high expectations for myself. And the thing is, it's okay to have goals, right? I'm all for, you want to have a goal to reach a certain level or earn a certain amount of money. That's okay. But don't let that be the only thing. Because what happened with me was every time I hit that milestone, it was great for literally 5 minutes. For 5 minutes, it was like, awesome, I've done it. Now what? Right? Now what? What's the next one? Oh, I'm not there yet. Or that person. And we started all over again. And so if we tie, you know, our worth to these external things,
Mhm.
then we're never really going to reach it, right? It's always going to be like that, the treadmill or the hamster wheel where we'll get it and then we'll want the next thing. So for me, I really had to change my definition of success to be more about how do I want to feel or what's important to me? How do I want to be spending my time? Because that's different, right? And that's more ongoing versus just a tick on a box, right? Ticks on boxes are okay for goals, but looking internally and be like, okay, what is it? Like, what do I want to be doing? Like, what value do I want to bring to my work, or how do I want to help people? And we're starting to ask ourselves different questions. What impact do I want to have on people in my life, right? And if we can start to look at it differently and add a more holistic view, then I think we can really start to feel better about our work and about ourselves and about how we define success.
Yeah. Was that easy for you to figure that out? I mean, there could be multiple other reasons as well, right? Why some people keep on going. It would be self-worth related. I mean, there's
Yeah,
plenty of reasons why people stay in jobs that do not make them happy at all, even if they don't have a huge career, literally. I mean,
yeah,
it's not even linked necessarily to
no,
it. So was it easy for you to find that out? Or like what did you
no.
do to figure that out? Yeah.
It was a coach that helped me figure that out. Um, but and coach, I honestly, like, I still have coaches, and coaches still help me figure out stuff that I had no idea, like my blind spots, and can help me connect the dots. But even if you don't have a coach, like, just recognizing patterns too in yourself, and it takes a lot of reflection and self-awareness and looking back and saying, okay, in your career, when have you been the happiest? Right? What were those moments? And we can't always recreate those moments, but we can look at, okay, what were the things surrounding it? Like, what were the tasks you were doing, or how did you feel when you were doing that? And how can you get more of that in your life? Right. So it's just looking for those patterns. Or when were you most miserable at work? What was it? Like in my case, anytime I was most miserable at work was when I had a micromanager, when I just felt like I couldn't, you know, be creative or explore things, or no room for failure, right? Like looking at what are those patterns, um and even looking externally too, right? Like, was it when you had work life balance? What did that look like? Was it your boss? Was it the people you worked with? Was it the environment? I have some clients now where it's great they work from home, but they actually thrive when they're in an office. So it's
Mm.
like, okay, how can you look for a job that either is hybrid or brings you back into an office? Um, right. So it's just looking at what are the patterns, what are the things that make you feel good, that bring you energy, that bring you joy. Opposite, what are the cons? What are all those things you didn't like? And seeing, okay, how can you get more of the what you did like back into your life? And if you can get help from a coach or a mentor or a friend to help you talk through it and connect the dots, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I fully agree. That's amazing. What would you say that I'm not sure if the question is correct. My Germanness is sometimes horrible with me. So
It's okay.
so basically what I wanted to get to is I want to make sure that there's no wrong misconception being like, oh, I'm not happy at my job right now. So perhaps, I need to quit everything altogether and also become an
Mm,
entrepreneur, which I think is also very, very common these days, especially because of social media. It's like glorifying a lot.
yeah,
And I don't say don't do it, just there's so many options, right? So I think it's very tough as well of a decision, and we should not take it too easily either, let's say.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but what would you say for the people that actually decide to stay in corporate jobs? Does it mean, and this is, as I said, a little bit of a rhetorical question, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Does it mean if I'm not happy while striving for that success, that I need to take on a job where I gain less and I am less important?
I think there's no right or wrong.
Hmm.
I think we need to care less about what others think of us and that judgment piece, and just do what feels right for us in the moment. If it means, let's say you're in a very stressful job right now, or you're managing, people and you don't enjoy that, but maybe it means taking a step down or taking a lower pay to get that, less stress or balance, then go for it, right? Do what feels right to you. We don't all need to be constantly climbing the corporate ladder or trying to take on bigger roles or anything like that. We really should just be doing what we want to do and what's going to bring us that peace and joy and fulfillment in our lives. So I think it's, a matter of just forgetting what other people think and say and doing what you want to do, whatever that is. If you want to change, you know, jobs, companies, industries, go for it. But I also think that there's a lot of ways to find more of that joy and balance by staying in your current role, but it usually means having some uncomfortable conversations, right? So
Mhm.
it could mean, I don't know, maybe you need help or you're working too many hours or you're not quite sure what you're doing with something, and but it's you feel embarrassed if you put up your hand or you're worried about how you'll be perceived. And so I think sometimes too, we can make our jobs a lot better if we're willing to put our hand up, if we're willing to have the uncomfortable conversation, like with our boss or with a colleague or whoever that is. I think we can, make our jobs better if we're willing to work at it. But no matter what we do, it takes work to make something better.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. It does. I just want to be really clear that there's not this misconception out there that, oh, if I want a happy life and a happy, fulfilled career, that means I should not be on the accelerator anymore. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But
Right.
but
And
it is a good
also, yeah,
question because oftentimes the people that accelerate the most, there's a cost coming with that. And I think especially younger folks sometimes don't really realize how big that cost is until they're in the situation and then they feel like, damn, now I made this decision already, so I have to stick with it. Or I'm
yeah,
not consistent, or everything was for
right.
nothing. You know,
Yeah.
these which is another way of limiting beliefs, basically.
Yeah. And I think there's different paths, right? So, one of the women I interviewed for my book, she used to be the president for Weight Watchers, actually, for the Americas. And before that, she was CEO of a coffee company here in Canada. And her story is so inspiring to me because she thought, I can't be a good mom and a good career woman at the same time.
Mhm.
But she actually found a company where her values aligned with the company's values. She became CEO of that company and had more work-life balance than when she was a VP in another company.
Oh,
So all to say, like, yes, not everywhere can you have that. Sometimes your job will, come at a cost to your personal life, depending on the nature of the job. But sometimes with the right company, you can find it. So I also think too, there's this misconception out there of, oh, if you're a certain level or whatever, then your whole personal life is gone. And that may not be the case either. It may just be finding the right company and culture for you.
yeah. No, fully agree. That's also where like it's the inner work meeting external variables or circumstances, right? And this fit needs to be there. But
Yes.
probably, in my opinion, if you don't do any inner work, if you do not at all know what keeps us going, what are my drivers,
Yeah.
what are the beliefs, the stories, then it will be
Values.
so
Yeah.
hard to find also the right company because then you
Yeah.
get really easily in those like a toxic relationship kind of situation where you want to move forward and that's why you choose a company that lets you move forward, but you have to give it all of your lifetime, like all of your brain cells, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So those toxic relationships kind of form also from employee to employer, like
Hmm.
in love relationships basically, right? Like then
Yeah.
they attract each other kind of
Definitely.
in some way.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
took, like, when I went away to that 3-day offsite with a
Mhm.
coach, she had me do an exercise where I literally, so if all of you are listening, if you want to go do this exercise, it was really, really insightful. And she had me draw a river, and she had me draw whatever came to mind, but through pictures, which I am horrible. I can't even really draw stick people, but I did it. And she had us draw out our career path. And from the very beginning, like I started working at a very young age, like babysitting. And then I worked for my dad. And, I worked a lot in high school. And she had us write down every job we've ever had. And then whatever came to mind for that. And just things we noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And so sorry. Excuse me. And one of the things, so the pattern I found was, I thrived under certain leadership styles. I thrived when the environment was more entrepreneurial. But I had never done that work before. I had never connected the dots to see, okay, what are those common patterns? What did I enjoy most about all of my work? And then looking at that, okay, my next role or in my current role, I need to bring more of this into it. So being able to see those patterns too is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And also just as a motivation for everybody that's still struggling to see patterns, definitely something that's like a skill that can be learned. And once you learn it, you cannot unlearn it. You'll see patterns everywhere and will just help your life overall to make better decisions. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, nice. So I love the exercise. And also I love that how she did it, that she didn't say write down what was good or bad, just write down what comes to mind, because that had an imprint in some way on you, right? So that is a really great exercise. I love that. Oh, good. You need to drink a little more.
Something just went down the wrong way.
Oh, good. So, you said you have a lot of clients, also one-on-one. What would you say are, according to your experience in the field, let's say like the main 2-3 stories that are limiting your clients from actually creating that fulfilling career in life?
I'm not qualified or I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 99% of my clients have that at some point, not about everything in their life, but definitely about some parts, like, oh, I'm not good enough at that, or I'm not qualified for this, so I can't, do that. Can't put my hand up. And it's like, but how do we get good at something? And, I use the analogy of the first time you go ride your bike or jump in a pool, do you know what you're doing? No, we have to learn. And we only learn by doing it. So just going through it and doing it. And it's the whole imposter syndrome, right? Everyone has imposter syndrome. And we just have to go keep, do the work and learn and get better as we're going through it. So I'd say that's a big one. And what else? What else would, fear. I do an exercise with all my clients on defining their fears. And we all have this very similar core fears, right? Fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of loss. So, especially in the corporate world, not speaking up, not setting boundaries, not saying no, because we picture like, oh, I'm going to lose my job tomorrow and I'm going to be living on the streets, right? We tend to go to worst case scenarios, and that happens all the time. And so when I ask my clients, okay, if you, speak up in a meeting tomorrow and share an idea, what's the worst case that can happen? And in their heads, yesterday they were probably thinking, I'm going to get fired and lose, and I'll be on the streets.
Yeah.
Right? That's what our heads tell us, those stories. When I ask them to say it out loud, it's like, maybe I'll look stupid. It's like, okay. And do you think anyone's really going to remember that like a week from now? No, they're going to be thinking how they look stupid in a meeting, right? We're always thinking about our mistakes, what we've done. We're selfish. We don't sit around all day and analyze what everyone else said in a meeting, right? We think about what we did, what we said. So once we can voice those fears out loud and put them down on paper, we realize they're not the same stories we say in our heads.
Yeah.
And it's something that we'll either learn from it, or it'll go really well, or we'll just, we'll move on after a few days. We'll feel embarrassed and then move on.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. I like that. I love that actually. And it's also really interesting because I think the fears are similar, but their extent is different in, for instance, different cultures. So, me as a German coming from Europe to the US, I can now way more understand that those fears and anxiety are much stronger here because you can get fired easily.
Hmm.
You can get fired and not have healthcare anymore, and needing to at short notice figure out your whole life again, basically. What is
Yeah.
not the case in Europe, like it's just not the case. You cannot fire somebody in Germany that easily, and sure you can fire somebody, but they're not going to be on the streets the next day. They have like at least like 3 months, if not longer, where they can figure out what to do next. They have a
Wow.
social benefit system, right, where they know they're just not going to be on the streets. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So I can totally understand that all of that, anxiety, the fears, and then also the stories that we build out of them are so much stronger in the USA. I think Canada is a little bit nicer, let's say, with their employees than the USA, but I can totally understand now how it's even a bigger deal here and how it's even more important to ask yourself the questions, because what's the option? Being miserable your whole life? No, right? I mean, I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah. And it is. It's a totally legitimate fear, right? Fear of losing a job. It's scary. It's happening all the time now, right? Especially with lots of different startups and tech companies and everything, right? There's job losses happening right, left, and center. And but it's the trade-off, right? It's the, as you were just saying, staying miserable or not speaking up or not going for something, challenging versus taking a risk and yeah, it paying off and you maybe being a lot happier and more fulfilled in your role. And yeah, so let's say you lose your job. It's awful. Nobody wants that. But there are also tons of companies out there hiring all the time, right? So, you know, hopefully that wouldn't happen. That's a, absolute worst case scenario. But there are lots of new opportunities as well out there.
Yeah. And that's then also where the mindset work kicks in, right? Which is also part of it in our work. What story do we tell ourselves when something happens like a setback?
Yes.
Because that will depend on how quickly we get back on our feet, how we appear, what energy and charisma we have in job interviews again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all like, I don't know, kind of self-fulfilling, going in
Yeah.
circles. But once you
Yeah.
dive in and you solve one thing, you're like, oh, I can actually solve it. I don't have to feel that way. And I think that's also a big moment in clients' lives in general, right? Where they feel like, oh, I can actually change the way I feel by how I think
Mhm.
about it, by before, but what does it, how do I think about it depends on what I'm afraid of. And then once I learn, I can go through that fear and there's nothing worse behind it, but there's relief behind it, right? Because we
Yeah.
always think if you go through our fears, there's something even worse happening. Like you say in your book, a lot of the times the term can of worms, which I found so interesting, that people are afraid to open up the can of worms. Like if I look at
Mhm.
my fears, there might be more fears popping up, and I might find out that there's so much that I need to work on, that I'm gonna be overwhelmed or whatnot. And this was really interesting to me because I'm a very curious person. So once I understood like how personality development, professional growth work, I was like all over it. So I was like diving into those cans of worms because I was so curious to find out what it is. What is there? What is holding me back? What doesn't make me tick? But reading your book, I was like, oh, not everybody's like that. Yeah, now it makes a lot of sense, right? So
Yeah, it's true, and it's funny. It's now that you and I we're on the other side, right? Where we know, like, yeah, if you can dive in,
yeah,
if you can identify them and work on them, then you're just going to end up like a stronger and
yeah,
happier and more fulfilled person on the other side. But you have to be willing to go there. But it's so interesting because now, I'll be watching TV or a movie, and it's like the person has to deal with the challenge they're facing and they're not willing to deal with it, right? And like their lives are miserable and they're mean or like they're angry and I'm just like waiting for that moment where they finally realize, okay, if I deal with this,
yes,
if I actually like face this, then life will get better. And like those are my favorite stories.
yeah, yeah. And also, right, pattern recognition. So once you know it, you'll see it in movies.
Yes.
It's like before you were watching the movie, you're just like, oh, what's about to happen next? And now you're like, I know this is gonna happen. When is it gonna come?
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, I think all the Marvel movies are basically like that, right? How does somebody become a superhero is by facing their fears and going through something very hard. And
Yeah.
then but finding their strength in that. And then probably sometimes even, being surprised by their strength. They're so empowered,
Mhm.
they're like, whoa, that's me.
Yeah.
So they come back as a different person once they, go back to real life. Sometimes that happens in those movies, right? Not
Yeah.
always, but
Yeah. And even I love studying like elite athletes. I study them a
Mm.
lot. And the one, well, there's more than one, but one big difference between somebody who makes it as an elite athlete and somebody who, doesn't is their ability to bounce back.
Mhm.
So it's a given that you're going to, as an athlete, you're going to lose games or matches or whatever it is you're doing. And usually it's those that then make you stronger, right? That then you can, learn, okay, what do I need to do differently next time? Or how can I be better next time? And things like that. If you're always winning, you're going to come across a time where you stop winning, but you don't have the skills to bounce back, right? So we bounce back, like we learn from failures, we learn from setbacks. It sounds silly, but I'm like, I actually like the down times in my life right now, like, when it is a challenging time, because I'm like, ooh, I know there's going to be something like this will be helpful for me later on.
Yeah.
And, just learning to embrace those moments as well.
Oh wow, that this whole statement was packed. I mean, I have like different things I wanted to say about that. So the one thing I love the analogy with the sports team because exactly they if they always win, they never build that muscle. And I think people that are interested in sports, they know what we're talking about because we know those games, like those matches. It doesn't matter what sports it is. Where like there's two very distinct teams, where always one team is in the past has won and you can see that then the basically the losing team that has lost before was they show up differently. It's mentally way more challenging for them to show up as a winning team with the right mindset to be able to win just because they got defeated so many times. And
Mhm.
it's so important that we in our lives, right, we can always win. It's not like that, even though how many times we tried and we failed,
Yeah.
there is this huge possibility just still to do it, but it's like it's becoming that monster basically. It's not
Yeah.
even it's not even about the skills of the other team anymore at some point. It's just a mentally feeling
Mhm.
defeated already before going into the game, which is
Yeah.
making us lose. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And then the other thing you said was about darn. Could you remember the last part of what you said? It was such a good point.
What did I say? Bouncing back. What else? We have to have failures. We have to have down times.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, sorry. That
That's
was
okay.
I'll perhaps cut it out or not. I'm not sure yet. We'll see later. Also, making ourselves a little bit vulnerable here. That's fine. There's
Yeah.
a lot going on in the brain, and everything is like woo, excited, and we might forget about things. What I wanted to put out there as well, also for the audience, is like that sometimes, even if you're in the beginning phases, perhaps the first team lead or first, bit higher role, perhaps director even, we tend to think, or we glorify the higher up leaders. We think they have it all figured out, right? I mean, I think that's also a very natural thing to do. But what is really interesting once you're on the other side, as you said, and you switch roles and you help people to go through their fears and to reevaluate the stories they tell themselves, is that if you don't tackle those issues, they will just stick with you. So I have one client and she's amazing. She's super smart, charisma and energy like 100. And she has an amazing job at 36 years old. Great pay, the best pay of the people that I know, of the people that I know personally or in my in my clientele. And still she's struggling with the same thing. So it doesn't matter at some point. It doesn't matter. She's sometimes sitting in meetings not afraid to speak up, afraid to look dumb, even though she's
Yeah.
she's achieved so much already. And from the outside, you're like, just wow, how did you do that? And you think this person has it all figured out, but it's not the case. And it's okay, because otherwise we would not need to grow anymore. And what life would that be if there were no challenge whatsoever? We just know everything from the get go, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's just not reality.
Yeah. And I think the thing to remember too is, as you said, we never know how somebody's feeling.
Yeah.
Never. Unless you were inside somebody, you never ever know how they're feeling. And, I'm all for, I think great leaders are vulnerable, but a leader, if they have a team, they're not going to go around being like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing a good job, or oh, I don't know what I'm doing. No one wants a leader who stands up and is like, I don't know what I'm doing. I really I'm not confident in my abilities. We don't want to see it, right? But it's probably happening. And it's totally okay, because a leader having that awareness is going to be an even better leader, because, they're going to work on it, or they're going to, like this client of yours having a coach. That's phenomenal. Like, she's going to do so well. And it doesn't mean that they're not good, but I just want us all to recognize we're not likely going to hear it. Same with a doctor, right? You don't want to go see a doctor and the doctor be like, oh, I don't know, I'm really nervous about operating on you. Like, no one wants that. We want to hear I've got this. You're going to be great. Like, you're in great hands.
Yeah.
Right? So whether that's how the doctor feels or not, we don't know, but we want to think they're confident, right? So just knowing you're never going to know the true story of how somebody feels inside, but know that it is very common across most people. I think I have a stat in my book that 85% of people feel self-doubt. 85%. I think the other 15% are narcissists, so I don't even really care about them. So I really feel like everyone in the world feels self-doubt, and just know it's normal and natural. It doesn't mean you have to go and share it with everybody, but just know that it's okay to feel that, and it doesn't mean you're not doing a great job.
Yeah. And again, if you recognize that pattern in yourself, and if you did the big work that is actually where the self-doubt is holding you back, that means you can move on and use that self-doubt as a motivator, for instance, to do the additional, I don't know, if you have self-doubt about being a good leader, to do the additional check-in with the employee where you're not sure if they're doing well right now, so you can also,
totally.
let's say, utilize that in a positive way for you and for the team without telling them what's actually going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good point, actually. I think, yeah, in general, I think we don't talk enough about those topics. So we are all completely blindsided somewhat in our careers. And obviously, if you're blindsided, you cannot see any patterns. You cannot understand what is really going on. You cannot put stuff into relation, like even layoffs and stuff, right? I think the more we can understand a little bit, it helps us also to digest and to, bounce back again from the setbacks. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. What else? Do you have anything, considering the whole conversation that we had? Is there something else that is nagging you, or like, we need to touch that topic as well?
I would say just one, the biggest lesson I learned in corporate is when I showed up as my true self, or as my authentic self. I know that word's overused sometimes, but I love it. When I showed up authentically, that is when I thrived.
Like,
so
also externally, so to speak. So like in terms of promotion.
Yeah, in general, because for so long I acted how I thought I should in certain roles. Not 100%, but there were definitely elements where I was like, ooh, I should act this way now, or I should act that way. And I would hold a piece of me back. Or when I was a leader, it was like, oh, I have to pretend everything's okay. Everything's great. So I would put on this face all the time where if anyone asked me, how are you? I'd be like, great. And I never really let people in sometimes when I was struggling, or when I was exhausted, or, things like that. And once I started showing up with more vulnerability and with more authenticity, that is when I really feel like my career took off. And when my home life got better, because when we're acting how we think we should, we're using way more energy. It's draining. And so when you can just show up as your true self, it's freeing. Like you don't care as much about what other people think. You get to conserve some energy. And I just feel the more we can do that and be more open and vulnerable and sharing, I just think we can all walk around a lot happier.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And I would not, I would like to say, nobody should use that as an excuse to be like, oh, today I'm feeling bad, so I'm going to be an asshole to everybody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No
That's not what
assholes.
we mean.
Don't be an asshole.
Exactly. No. But it's all connected because once we do the inner work, at some point there comes the point of self-love as well. And if we work on all these things, then we can be actually figure out what it is our true authentic self. Because some people
Mhm.
don't even remember, so to speak. So
Yeah.
yeah, just wanted to add that because just being
Yeah.
impulsive all the time doesn't necessarily mean be your authentic true self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Shannon. This was an amazing interview. I enjoyed every minute of it. The last question that I want to make sure I ask you is like, where can people find you, and what is your preferred either social media or network that you like to go to?
Sure. So you can find me. My website is shannontalbot.com. There's also a link to my book there. My book is available on Amazon as well. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So just look up Shannon Talbot on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. I write quite often on there. And then as well on Instagram, which is at Shannon Talbot _coaching. So would love to have you follow me and engage, say hi. And if ever, I can help you out, please let me know.
Nice. I love it. Okay. Thank you so much, Shannon, for being on the show and for sharing so many insights with us and with the community. And yeah, perhaps I'll have you back at some time.
Thank you. This was super fun. I really enjoyed it.